It's been described as a star chamber, Larry, what's going on now, but there's no other guest that appears on Crowdsource the Truth that had more direct firsthand involvement with more of the players in the Bill Clinton impeachment than you. How are you today, Larry?
I'm here. I'm okay.
That's good.
I'm here watching the country go to hell. I'm
Yeah.
not careful.
Well, we're all worried about that for sure. And I know you've got a lot to share with us. What we're going to be doing today, Larry, is basically looking at this overall process that was kind of put in motion by Adam Schiff and comparing it to the impeachment of Bill Clinton, which you've got a lot of knowledge about. So what did you want to start with as far as this conversation goes, Larry?
Well, I think it probably be good to start with the beginning of my involvement in the impeachment of Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Jason, of the 37 major scandals with Bill Clinton, the major ones, 36 of them originated with me.
Wow.
36. The only one that did not originate with me was him getting the haircut in Atlanta and holding up the entire airport while he got his haircut. But all of the stuff having to do with Whitewater, all of the stuff having to do with Vince Foster, all of the stuff having to do with Ron Brown, all of the stuff with all of those things, all originated with me. And if you go back to the congressional records, Bob Dornan and a couple of others would at night, they would do these little 5-minute speeches to the House. They would get on the floor and they would make public speeches that would be logged into the congressional record. Mm-hmm. And if you go back and look at those, you will see I'm telling the truth. Most all of them were using my name. And
Larry, is there a way for the public to access that congressional record?
I would assume so. It's a public record.
Okay.
Sure is. But I would look primarily at Bob Dornan. And in that day, I worked with Newt Gingrich, who was not Speaker at the time. And Gingrich would tell me over and over that if I would help him and if they could get control of the House, that he would become Speaker and that they would bring Clinton to justice. Well, as it turned out, they did get control of the House. He did become Speaker. But I waited 90, then 120 days, and there was nothing. Finally, I called him, and he said, "You just don't understand. It takes time to do these things," which was a lie, and I knew it, and he knew I knew it. And, they were in the process of wheeling and dealing and making their little deals. But there's one interesting thing about the Senate portion of the Clinton trial. Mm-hmm. I was working with then the attorney that was doing the prosecution, which was David Shippers from Chicago, brilliant attorney, brilliant guy. Mm-hmm. We were in the cloakroom of the Senate, and he was getting his notes and everything ready. And all of a sudden, in comes Trent Lott and Bob Dole. Now, the reason I bring this up, I just saw on Fox Trent Lott. And they were talking, I don't remember what all the conversation was about, but at one point Trent Lott said, "Look, it didn't matter. We didn't have the votes to impeach him."
Clinton, you mean?
So we couldn't, we couldn't, get the votes in the Senate. Now that was an out and out lie. He sat right there on national TV again, as they do, and lied through his teeth. Number one, when he and Bob Dole came in to David Shippers and I, when they came in, Bob Dole took his old crippled arm, threw up his briefcase on this long table that was in there. And Trent Lott said these words, I'll never forget them as long as I live. "Look, guys, I don't care if you've got Bill Clinton shooting somebody between the eyes right downtown on Main Street and you've got video of it. He is walking."
Wow.
And
Trent Lott said that to you.
Heavily. Trent Lott said that, not so much to me, but to Shippers. Now, if you'll get David Shippers' book about the impeachment, he tells that story.
Oh, wow.
So Trent Lott's lying when he said they didn't have the votes. Now, what actually happened, when it came time to vote, Arlen Specter from Pennsylvania We had it won. We had Clinton. He was fixing to be put out of office. It came time for the vote. Arlen Specter abstained.
I remember
When
that.
he abstained from voting, that threw the vote to the vice president, who then got the vote, and he voted to let him off. Now, about 2 to 3 months later, Arlen Specter's wife got a position on the National Parks and Tourism Commission or board for $250,000 a year.
Huh.
That's how the actual trial went, folks. Don't let anybody kid you. That's how the trial went.
So they tried to rig that, Larry. Arlen Specter, if I recall, had something to do with the JFK, the Warren Commission, didn't he?
Arlen Specter was a rookie at the time, and he was actually put on the Warren Commission. He was the youngest senator on the Warren Commission. As a matter of fact, he dealt with the issue of the magic bullet.
Right.
It was his portion of the Warren Commission that dealt with telling that this bullet that made left turn, whatever, that it was okay, that it did happen that way.
Right. So he's basically a professional liar for 50 years.
Yes, they all are, but he especially. So when you hear today about how great that thing with Clinton was and how everything was treated so fairly and how everything was right, that's not true, folks. It was rigged back then. It was rigged back then. And what the Republicans got by weaseling Clinton back into power is they were able to get things done together after the impeachment, where Clinton had to concede to the Republicans to live up to his agreement to back off of some of his craziness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why subsequently you had some years when Clinton was president after the impeachment where things actually did get done in Congress. But it was all a scam. It was all a show. It was not true. Now, I do not believe it's anywhere near as crooked as what we're seeing today. Nowhere near it. But I just want people to understand I was there. I was a part. The issues that were being brought up in that impeachment, they originated from me, folks, and you can check it out on radio programs all across America. I was the one breaking them. Every week I would break another scandal just to make it hard on them. Every week. And anybody that's listening now that remembers me from those days, I think, can type in or tell you in this chat thing that I'm telling the truth. Some of them bound to have been there.
Yeah.
And heard that.
Well, we've got a question coming from the chat, Larry. JJ wants to know if you think this whole impeachment process will quietly go away. I don't think so.
The difference in this impeachment versus the Clinton and Nixon and all, whatever, there's a difference, JJ, in this one and those. This one's not about President Trump. This one is not about President Trump. This is a planned takeover of our country by this new progressive society that wants to transform our form of government into a socialist communist government and to literally take us over the edge and change our form of government. If it were just about getting rid of Trump, then, yeah, you could maybe look and say, well, where are the similarities? But the reason you don't see the similarities of then is because this impeachment is not about President Trump. This impeachment, you ought to take his name out, as I have said over and over, and insert ours. This is an impeachment. Yes, this is an impeachment designed to prove once and for all we, the people of America, no longer have an active say in how our government is run and what type of government we have.
It's scary, Larry, but you're right. Larry.
Well, all I can say to folks is if you know my history, I'm certainly in a position to be able to call it.
Yeah.
I was there, and I'm here on this one. And I see the differences. I see with the people I work with the sources and contacts I have to deal with every day. I see what's going on. I see the struggle.
Yeah. Larry, Cynthia's got a very good question for us. Cynthia's saying that she doesn't understand why Congress people lie to Congress and don't get charged. I think I understand why. There are certain situations in the law where lawyers or people acting within the contexts of lawsuits or proceedings and things can say certain things with immunity within the context of that. In other words, you can accuse someone of something in a lawsuit and you've got total immunity against being accused of defamation. Otherwise, anybody bringing a lawsuit against somebody who loses the lawsuit would then be sued for things that they allege in the lawsuit. So I think Adam Schiff probably uses his law degree to carefully drop little turd bombs in the punch bowl.
Well, you're right. And Cynthia, what they have with Congress, years ago a law was passed to waiver anything said as a function of their role as a member of Congress.
Right.
They have a waiver. And they claimed the reason they pursued this was that if they could not speak openly, you could not have honest and heated debates. So therefore, everybody, as a member of Congress, as long as they're doing it as a function of their role in Congress, they can do anything they want to, say anything they want to, and be held harmless legally from slander and libel.
Yeah.
Now that protection does not protect them outside of their congressional function, and to that degree, that's where I believe Schiff, Nadler, and a whole bunch of them have stepped outside and should be held liable. But nobody's pursuing it because it would be a sticky suit, and they would claim, of course, no matter what they said, no matter where they said it, it would be a function of their capacity as a member of Congress.
Right. And it would become a big legal battle, and sometimes people just aren't in the mood for that.
Right. And it would be a battle that no one would understand. The average person wouldn't understand.
Yeah, politically it wouldn't look good. Yeah, Adam Schiff seems very concerned with, I mean, that's the thing that people need to keep in mind. I think a lot of the sort of even-minded, level-headed people who watch us on Crowdsource the Truth, Larry, they look at all this stuff in the context of their own lives, and if people behave honestly, they expect other people to behave honestly. But I think what we're seeing is that every single thing that's happening is some form of legal chess move that's been very carefully calculated to achieve a goal that quite probably is not what it appears to be on its face.
Well, and that's why, you know, in a program past, you and I referred to how they had weaponized the legal system and how they have weaponized the political systems.
Yes.
They have now got it to where they're mixing and matching the two in ways that was never meant to be.
Yeah. I would even say, Larry,
I keep begging people, Jason, forgive me, I keep begging people to understand President Trump is the least significant part of all of this. This is all about, once and for all, the big-time ultimate shootout. The big one. Can they transform our form of government right under our nose? Can they take our ability to, we the people, govern this country? Can they take that away from us? And that's what they're in the process of doing.
You know, it's interesting, Larry, because at the time when Ronald Reagan was president and there was all this talk about the Cold War, I was a little kid, so that ended pretty early in my life, and I've historically had a view that the threat of communism was pretty overblown. You were a Green Beret, you've seen actual combat and some pretty crazy clandestine operations that you've discussed on the show, and you were very much involved in the fight against communism. And it seems that I was naive, because here it is right in front of us. This seems like a decades-long communist infiltration that is coming to fruition now.
It is. And I go back to something Ronald Reagan said in his farewell speech. I can't quote it, but basically he said, that we are just one generation from becoming a communist country. Just one. And what I fear is we're in that generation now. We're living it today.
Yep.
And when you talk about communism back when I was active versus today, well, one of the fears we had, the greatest fear we had in that day for President Reagan, was what was considered or called the domino theory.
Yeah.
And that was the systematic spread of communism up through Central America, and that eventually it would grow to the point that it was in Mexico, right at our southern border. And he knew, we knew, everybody knew then, that if communism got to Mexico, it would be untenable, because we could not protect this nation from penetration across our southern border, because it is so porous, and it had been and has been and will be so porous that it could be infiltrated at any time. Well, look what's happening today.
Well, Larry, in the context of what you're telling us, the motivation for fighting Donald Trump on the wall is a lot clearer. Obviously, if part of the plan is, if we have communists in Congress like Adam Schiff, or, if we've got James Comey, we know Brennan, all these guys are former members of the Communist Party. They don't want a wall. This could be their plan, to have an immigration influx of communist infiltrators from the southern border and in Congress.
Well, and maybe the mistake we made in that day was we linked everything to, if communism spread to Mexico, then we would have fighters crossing our border, and that would be the risk, the immediate threat of war across our border. Well, what we're learning today is maybe that's not the strategy. Maybe the thing we need to worry about coming across the border are voters. Voters that can come across and get counted in elections to the point that they can weigh the election down to whatever they want.
Right.
We were looking for fighters. We weren't thinking in terms of doing it politically, just sending hordes of people across the border, getting to a point to where there's so many that are so permanently infiltrated into our country that then somebody says, well, gosh, you got to let them vote, right? Well, now you've got an entire block of voters that's growing daily that can outvote Americans.
And they're not even citizens of this country. I don't understand how this has ever been a debate, Larry. It makes no sense to me. I don't know why we have a country or citizens or laws if we're going to let people who aren't citizens enjoy certain aspects of the law while not adhering to other aspects of the law. Just yesterday, Larry, New York began allowing undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses. And there were huge lines around the block at the DMV. I didn't go over there, but this is in Queens. See, there's a new DMV here in New York City. They moved it. But this New York Times article talks about this long line. I mean, these aren't stupid people. They're undocumented, immigrants, but they obviously are dialed in enough to know that when it benefits them to get a driver's license, they're right over there. So if somebody motivates them to vote, I think we see that they can be mobilized. Oh, look at this. The New York Times is interviewing a guy named Roland Martinez. Can you guess how old he is, Larry? 33. Out of all the people waiting in that line, they happened to find a guy who is 33 years old. That's interesting to me. That seems to be a steganographic marker, a little coded message they're always showing up in articles in mainstream newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post. I remain convinced, Larry, that this is a method that maybe it's the editors of the newspaper sending out a coded message to the overlords who control their money, their salaries, or whatever, but letting them know this is a controlled story.
Absolutely. And Jason, this is the point behind these people coming in. They come in, they're here, right? So then, in the American way of being passive, the American way of being humane, well, golly gee, and you're going to start hearing this more and more. Put it down as another Nicholism, something that's coming that I told you about that you're going to see actually happen. They're going to come in here, and then all of a sudden the Democrats are going to start saying, look, they're here, so if they're here, occupying space, occupying ground, and they are able to exercise certain amenities available to Americans,
Right.
then it's totally unfair and inhumane to not let them have a vote as to how things are run around them. And all of a sudden, the bleeding hearts are going to say, you know, you're right, they're here. We ought to let them at least have a say. And there you go.
Yeah. Larry, it
And just
reminds
as you're
me.
saying with the media, Jason, just as you're saying with the media, Jason, the reason I know that this is the battle of battles is because, as you and I talked before, the media is all in. Mainstream media is all in. They can never go back to being considered a fair and free, open source of news. Never again can they. So it's either win for them or lose.
Yeah. And you know, Larry, everything that you're saying is so important. You're on point for sure. Forgive me for not reminding people who are watching us right now. Larry doesn't get paid to come on the show and share this information with us. He and I speak throughout the week. He's got contacts around the country that he's spending all his time talking with, and he's got a lifetime of experience that he shares with us. So if you're watching and enjoying the show, it's very important that people visit nicholslive.com and click on the donate tab. You can go to PayPal and use Larry's PayPal address, nicholslive@aol.com. You can send Larry some financial support. Christmas is almost here. I'm sure Larry's got even more expenses than he does just from the regular day-to-day stuff that's going on. So if PayPal is not agreeable to you, you can also put some money in an envelope and mail it to Larry, or you can contact Mary Ellen. She's got some alternate methods. Her phone number is being displayed right now. But Larry, everything that you're saying, it reminds me of that speech that JFK made. We've been talking about JFK today with Arlen Specter and all that. That was, as I recall, in front of was it the National Press Club, or it was some sort of presentation that JFK was giving to the press where he implored all of them to help. And he spoke about infiltration rather than invasion. I mean, this is what we're talking about, right? People coming over the border seemingly, all they want is driver's licenses, but the next thing we know, they're taking over.
That's right. And guys, I'm not saying every illegal Mexican or Guatemalan or whomever is coming in here is a part of some clandestine operation. They don't have to be. They are pawns. They are pawns that can be shaped and molded to do what the people that want to overthrow our government want them to do. Mm-hmm. They're pliable. They move as they are told as a group. I'm telling you, you've got to see it. If you don't see it, then all is lost. All is lost.
And not only that, Larry, even if there are, 1 million innocent, honest, undocumented immigrants who come here seeking a better life and they want to do honest work, out of that million, if 1% are bad guys, the innocent, honest people serve as cover for the infiltrators.
Absolutely. The Department of Homeland Security estimates, based off years of analyses, that upwards to 10% of the people coming into this country illegally are categorized either as terrorist or hardened criminals.
Wow.
Now figure 10% of 1 million. That's a lot of people.
It's 100,000 criminals and terrorists.
That's right, in this country.
Oh, now just
Today,
7 hours ago, Larry, sorry, real quick, the Department of Homeland Security is slamming New York law allowing illegal immigrants to obtain driver's licenses. This is from the National Review. That New York Times article came out yesterday, and I wanted to show it to you. And now this I've just noticed today. This is a so-called green light law, which passed in June and took effect on Monday, allows illegal immigrants to obtain New York City driver's licenses, rather New York State driver's licenses at New York City DMV branches.
And it's very important that people understand, what's the kicker about the driver's license? Well, when police pull somebody over for some traffic irregularity, one of the key things that tips them off to the status of somebody being here illegally is they don't have a driver's license.
Right.
So now when they pull them over and they have a valid driver's license, the police can do nothing in the form of a background check into that person they pulled over for a brake light being out.
It's worse than that, Larry. This article tells us that the law, this new New York law, prevents the DMV from sharing information about illegal immigrants with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So what that means is, even if someone walks in there who's wanted for doing crimes, and they submit voluntarily their information to one branch of the government, the Department of Motor Vehicles, they're being bound by Congress and the law to prevent the service of justice by sharing information. So in other words, if Mohammed Atta walked into the DMV on 33rd Street or 32nd Street, wherever they moved it to, and said, give me a driver's license, the DMV could not call the FBI and say, hey, that guy on the wanted poster just walked in here.
That's right.
It's so stupid.
I mean, guys, these things are horrible. And I like when they say green light law, because what it does, every time we pass a law availing some other service or amenity to the illegals, you just put up a big billboard saying, come on.
Right.
I mean, that's an invitation. My
For
God,
criminals.
come in, take advantage of it. You can come in and get a driver's license. Once you've got a driver's license, you can move freely around the country. Because remember, once they get a driver's license there in Queens, right, they can drive to Arkansas.
You can drive to Louisiana and get a gun, can't you? Oh, no, you need a local license in those states to get a gun.
Well, yeah, but I mean, just to be able to traffic throughout this nation with a legal driver's license is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous.
And
I didn't even know the stuff you just said about it blocking them from being able to share.
Right. It's crazy. I mean, listen, when you look at it in the context of somebody trying to make a law to protect this country, it makes no sense. But if you look at it in the context of Congress having been infiltrated by people who want to subvert the United States, well, this makes perfect sense. This is a law that helps that happen.
That's right. You know, it goes back to a time in my life when I was working with Japan, big corporation out of Japan called Uniden. Now, in that day, the big thing were these CD radios.
Oh, yeah.
Uniden was a major manufacturer of CD radios. So we go to this electronic show in Las Vegas.
CES.
And I'm there representing Uniden, their stateside contact. And I was with the president of Uniden. We were talking, and to be honest, I got to talking about, isn't this crazy? You know, we were just in a war with you guys. And now, here you are, you know, doing business, and at that time, they were the major supplier of overseas products here at that particular moment. And I asked him, I said, how does this work? And he told me, just as cold-blooded as I could say it to you or anybody else, he said, we learned. He said, why fight America when you can buy it? And I'm going, buy it? And he said, yes. You know, why put a military together? Why do all of this? We've learned that all you've got to do is buy what you call politicians. And they're easy to buy.
Wow. Wow.
And that's what they did. Now, unfortunately for Japan, once they established the model, You know, in that day, by the way, folks, if you want to check this out, it might shock you. In that day, Japan owned more property in New York than anybody in the country.
I remember there was
owned
a
all
big dust-up. They were going to buy Rockefeller Center, or maybe they did.
So soon after that, China figured it out with Clinton. Because guess what I did? I went running back and told Bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then guess what? Next thing you know, now China is competing with Japan, buying our politicians. And obviously they have won that battle because China is far more successful in trade today than Japan. But he looked me straight in the face. He didn't even stutter. He didn't even laugh. They don't laugh much. He wasn't laughing. He said, "My fight, we can buy you. Buy it." It makes sense.
It does.
And I believe that was a feat. I believe that was a feat that many in the Middle East have tried to accomplish by using oil.
Well, or cash, right? I mean, they have so much money from oil sales, they can do anything. Al Walid bin Talal. The thing is, Larry, I think they've graduated from that very direct. It's like anything, right? You take the first version of something, whether it's a Corvette or an airplane or a computer program, it's always more primitive than what you come out with 50 years later. So this notion of just straight buying people perhaps is a bit obsolete. It seems like social media, subversive practices, and social engineering are being widely used. We've heard about all these systems for doing it. They can, I mean, why buy someone for millions of dollars when you can manipulate them for a few thousand?
Right. I mean, it's become quite a science, I would suppose.
Right.
Of course, I'm not in the middle of it anymore, but from looking from the outside, knowing what I do, yeah, you know, figuring ways to take over America has become quite a science, and some more successful than others.
Yeah.
I was with the king of Saudi Arabia. I was with his son. He sent him over here, and I was given the task of being his contact. I was his main guy.
Do you remember which prince that was?
Abdullah.
Abdullah? King Abdullah.
King Abdullah, well, when he was a prince. I was with him when he bought his first bank in America. We bought the Union Bank on Markham and can't remember the name of the other street. Reservoir Road, maybe Markham and Reservoir. Bought the first bank for him.
Isn't Union Bank, isn't that the same crooked bank that the Bushes were laundering Nazi money with?
Could have been. I wasn't involved in it. Could have been. They were about as crooked as any bank anywhere.
Wow.
Of course, they were owned by Jackson Stevens, of course.
The bank was owned by the Stevens, and they sold it to the Saudis?
Yes. Yeah. Well, they sold the property to the Saudis. They didn't sell the bank. They sold the property the bank was in to the Saudis.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Got to keep getting that rent money, Larry.
Mm-hmm. And everything was going great with him until we went to Vegas, and then there was quite a stir over that. I went with him to Las Vegas, and then he had this system he had worked out in his mind that whatever he lost, he would double the bet and go again.
Uh-huh.
Well, he had lost $13 million in Las Vegas when his father called me and said, "Get him out of there." So we had to pull him out.
What hotel was that at, Larry?
Well, we were at the Caesars at the time. I mean, that's where we were staying. We jumped from one casino to the next.
Right.
He was literally peaking out the limit in some of these casinos.
Wow.
I mean, it was something. That was an ordeal and a half, buddy.
What year was that, would you say?
That would have been, oh my word, buddy, that would have been maybe in the early 80s, I suppose. Somewhere in the 80s.
Las Vegas was quite a bit different in the early 80s than it was in the mid to late 90s. I remember when they built the Bellagio Hotel, that was sort of a new era of Vegas because it kicked off these super luxury hotels with 5-star restaurants and all that, you know, Michelin stars and all that. Prior to that, Vegas was famous just for gambling, strip clubs and like a $2 steak dinner. They never had fine dining. And now there are more Michelin star restaurants in Las Vegas than there are in Paris.
Yeah. Never forget that Prince took him to a place called the Chicken Ranch. Wow, did he have fun.
It's a prostitution place.
All had fun. Yeah, we all had fun. We ordered it off the menu. It was interesting.
So you're saying that the Prince of Saudi Arabia just walks into a place like that, and I mean, isn't that a huge security risk?
Well, yeah, he had his guards everywhere. I mean, when he goes into a place, he takes it over, or did back then.
Wow, that's amazing.
But I was the only one they trusted, of being an American. I was pretty well trusted.
You've had some amazing times, Larry. It's always interesting to have these conversations. So let me take you back for a second, for the second half of our conversation, to some more details about Kenneth Starr. It was an interesting, set of circumstances you told us about. It was basically a preconceived scenario where Clinton was not really going anywhere, and now we've got a preconceived scenario that seems to be the opposite, where they're dead set on kicking out Trump irrespective of the facts.
Right. Kind of like they reversed engineered the process.
Something like that. But it seems like impeachment is a political tool no matter how you want to slice it.
Right. And, I get tickled when I see Kenneth Starr on Fox as a commentator now, and he is so polite and so courteous and so this, that, and the other. Folks, when I was working with him, he was just as controlled as anybody else, especially when we had the shootout over Vince Foster. I mean, the whole thing with Starr is such a joke.
What do you mean the shootout over Vince Foster? What was that about?
Well, not to get sidetracked, but, I had proof with the autopsy report. I had proof with the Secret Service memo that Vince Foster did not die in Fort Marcy Park the way they said he did. You got it?
Yes.
I could prove that beyond any shadow of any doubt in a court of law. When finally it came to the point where Starr called me in to the Little Rock office. He flew in. We go in. He said, all right, Nichols, you got 24 hours. I'm not going to rule this anything other than a suicide unless you can prove who killed him. And I remember looking him straight in the face and saying, hey, hot nuts, what's your job?
Yeah, why is he doing anything?
It doesn't matter.
With Vince Foster?
It doesn't matter if you can't prove that, if you can't prove who killed him, then we're going with closing the case, calling it suicide. Now, I went on the radio that night with Mike Reagan and others and told that exact story. Maybe it's George Putnam, not Mike Reagan. But anyway, I went on the radio and told about that conversation, and lo and behold, the next day, boom, he shut it down. Called it a suicide.
But I don't understand. How did Kenneth Starr, sorry to interrupt you, Larry, but how did Kenneth Starr have that power? He was just a special counsel investigating the impeachment. He's not the coroner. He's not the lead investigator.
He was the one that controlled the investigation of Vince Foster. He was the one that closed the door on it. When he ruled that it was suicide, it was over. It was over. Now, he was mad at me at the time because I was hiding, what's her name? Not Lewinsky, but, Lewinsky. Anyway, it was a whole deal over the blue dress. I was involved in getting the blue dress, and we were hiding it from him because we knew if he got Lewinsky, he would seal her, and she wouldn't be able to be used in Paula Jones's case. Paula Jones's attorneys were screaming at me to keep her hidden from Starr so that they could use her in the Paula lawsuit. And Starr threatened to prosecute me if I didn't turn Lewinsky over to her.
Wow.
And I just stuck to my story. I didn't have her.
The blue dress.
So that's not
famous.
That story, I'm telling you folks, is true. And then when you look at Kenneth Starr after he left, being the special prosecutor in that case, look what happened from then on. He's been fairly well taken care of with his different positions of you know, being the head of whatever school or whatever he got after that. He's had a pretty cush job since that.
Yeah. He basically did what they wanted him to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw where Kenneth Starr was. He left some university. He thinks today that testimony may have moved. I don't know, there's a lot of stuff people are talking about Kenneth Starr. Sondland's bombshell testimony is, according to Kenneth Starr, evidence of an impeachable offense. So there was a report that came out, Larry, where they're basically saying that, Trump should go to jail for 20 years, is what Adam Schiff said, but they haven't named the crime. They keep talking about this abuse of power.
Right.
There's no law that says you can't abuse power.
Well, is it abuse of power, obstructing Congress?
That's also not a law. Obstructing justice is...
Right. Well, obstructing justice is one thing, but obstructing Congress is another.
Yeah.
They got nothing. Representative Collins from Georgia is telling the flat, plain truth. Everything that you've all seen, everything that has gone on is fine. Let it go on, let it be said, whatever, ever. But as Collins will pointed out this morning, they are yet to establish a crime that he committed.
Yeah.
Now, what they're trying to do in the Senate is another lie. You heard this morning Chuck Schumer saying that if Mitch McConnell does not allow them to bring in at least the 4 main witnesses that they want to subpoena and the additional documents they want to subpoena, they're setting the stage for it to be a show of where the Republicans, once again, are just acting as frontmen and covers for President Trump. Now, Jason, that's not true. The Senate's job, now this is where you get away from the House. The House was sort of free-flowing. There are no real laws governing what the House does or how it does it. But when you get to the Senate, now you've got constitutional laws demanding how it should be done. You got it?
Yes.
Now, according to the Constitution, the Senate is to hear the case brought forward by the House and to hear the defense by the President and his people, and then they are to vote. They are not to open up another investigation. That's against the law. Mm-hmm. I heard it said this morning, which is probably the best way to explain it. I think it was Brett Baer said it this way, and I give him credit very seldom, but I do on this. It'd be like, Jason, you going into court in a trial. Mm-hmm. You made your case, the prosecution's made their case, and you turn it over to the jury. Mm-hmm. And then the jury comes out, instead of giving you a decision, the jury comes out and says, Your Honor, here's what we want to do. They didn't call all these witnesses, and we want to call them and hear what they want to try the case themselves.
Huh.
You don't do that. It's against the law. Well, that's what Schumer is trying to get people to believe.
Ah, interesting. Yes, there was. Well, so who was it? Mitch McConnell who shut down Schumer with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, McConnell is saying that the way it's going to work out, I can tell you exactly because I'm kind of involved in some parts of it. The way it's going to work out, the Senate is not going to, right out of the chute, call for a floor vote. They will not. They cannot. By law, they cannot. What they will do is they will open the trial. McConnell will open the trial. He will let both sides make their case. Once that's done, he will then call it to a floor vote for summary dismissal. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it'll work.
Well,
now, if you go for a floor vote of summary dismissal, you only have to have 51 votes.
Right.
Versus 2/3.
Wow. 51 votes to dismiss the charges, you mean? So that's beneficial to the president.
Right. Yes. If he doesn't get it, it's about the motion that you're voting on. If it's a vote for a motion, right, then that's 51 votes. If it's a vote, once you've heard the case going through the entire process, through the Senate, the entire trial, and you're voting whether to have him be removed from office, that takes a 2/3 vote.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting, Larry, what you're saying, because we're hearing news. True Pundit's got a story this morning that another House Democrat says he's going to vote against impeachment, and he's predicting that others will join. It's Colin Peterson, is one of just 2 House Democrats who voted against opening the impeachment inquiry. That's interesting. He's from Minnesota.
Now, what that is a part of, Jason, is a thing called the CHIP program and dragging vote. What's going on in the House right now, Pelosi is canvassing the votes. She knows how many votes she has in her hip pocket. Then they're turning around and they're evaluating each one of the members of their party and their vote. Now, if they have enough votes to move it from the House to the Senate, then any of those guys that are in districts that could be at jeopardy if they vote to go forward with it, they're going to give them a pass. It's called dragging their vote. They're going to let them drag their vote. Mm-hmm. And so there's no doubt there will be several, I would imagine, several Democratic members of the House that are going to vote not to impeach the president. But it will not affect the outcome.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think is going to happen, Larry? Will they shut it down in the Senate before they hear all the stuff the way you just described? Sounds like they might.
I think what they're going to do in the Senate is they're going to vote to hear it, first vote. Vote number 2, they're going to let both sides present their case. And then Lindsey Graham, most probably Lindsey, will introduce a motion to summarily dismiss the case for lack of procedural whatever, saying that they did such a weird procedure that it's not right to even have this hearing or have this trial.
But that's accurate. That wouldn't be a political play. That would be proper lawyering.
That's right. It'd be right. And Schumer knows it's right. And Schumer knows how it's going to go. So the way they're going to salvage it for their base is to make this last stand, ditch effort. So they can say to their base, guys, see, it's still going on. They're still covering for the president. There's still stuff hidden that they can't let be told.
Right.
To keep their base fired up.
Well,
but nobody, Jason, nobody in Washington, I swear to you, nobody in Washington has any doubt at all of how this impeachment trial thing's going to go. Nobody does.
Well, it sounds from what you're saying like it'll be annoying and it will waste time and resources, but it's not going to succeed at removing President Trump. And I mean, as you've told us many times, it's about what will it do to public perception and how will it affect the election in 2020.
That's all it's ever been about, hurting his campaign. And I'll tell you something else. The minute they do that, the minute they summarily dismiss the case, do not be surprised. You'll see the House turn right around with other causes and try to impeach him again.
They already said they're going to do that.
Well, they're going to do it. Up until the day President Trump goes into election in 2020, he will be dogged by impeachment. Has been planned for a long, long time.
And it seems like even if he gets reelected, they'll just keep doing it again. I mean, they just don't give up.
They just won't quit. The only hope we have is in 2020, if he's reelected, there is the possibility that people that go in and vote to put him in as president might not vote to put a Democrat back in their district in the House. And you might get a situation where the House changes hands to the Democrats. Conversely, If President Trump is defeated, the opposite is true again. The likelihood of people going in numbers enough to defeat President Trump, they are not likely to go in and vote to remove President Trump and then vote to keep a Republican in as their senator.
Yeah.
So you run the risk, if Trump loses, you'll have a Democrat president, a Democrat House, and a Democrat Senate, and then God help us.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's over.
Yeah. Well, Larry, RN is with us in the comments saying that if you want an inside view, you should look up the 45 communist goals put on the congressional record on January 10th, 1963. Apparently, number 35 is to discredit and disassemble the FBI. Well, perhaps James Comey and Robert Mueller were there specifically to do that.
And if they weren't, they'd sure done it.
Exactly.
You know, once again, Jason, this is why I say this is for all of the marbles. You're not ever going to, the media's played its hand. They're all in or all out. They're all in or all out. Look at the FBI. Immeasurable damage has been done to the FBI. James Comey did what nobody thought ever could be possible. It was made clear that after J. Edgar Hoover, there could never be the corrupt leadership of the FBI that was there during his time. And Comey has beat J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah. He has. You know, Larry, in our last 10 minutes, I want to shift topics just for a moment to get your opinion about this, because I know you're going to have a lot of good insights. Yesterday, Judge Emmett Sullivan rejected General Michael Flynn's, his lawyer, Sidney Powell, had put in a motion basically demanding Brady evidence from the FBI and wanting to overturn the general's plea deal. Emmett Sullivan rejected this and has called for a January sentencing. There was something like a 99-page order that he issued. Sorry, a 92-page order. I'm surprised it wasn't 93. But Emmett Sullivan issued this order basically excoriating Flynn, and Sidney Powell called it wrong and disappointing in a short statement. But what do you think is going on here, and what's your feeling about Michael Flynn's play to get out from going to jail going south?
It's just that. It's going south. The system wins again, Jason. The system wins again. We, the average person, even somebody like Flynn, we have no chance in this system, buddy. We have no chance.
Mm-hmm.
When we get crossways with the system, for us, it's over. And it's over in so many ways. Break us financially, break us morally, the whole 9 yards. Everything they did to General Flynn, everything they did was wrong. It was just wrong. They set him up. It's now known they set him up. The laws of entrapment and all that stuff that applies to bad guys, guess what? It didn't work with him, did it? But that's just a look into the future. This is what's going to happen. It's the only relief Flynn has, which I'm assured will come. It won't help him much, but it will come. He will get a pardon.
You sure?
If ever a man deserves a pardon, and many pardons, as you know, Jason, are controversial at best, this one is not. If anybody ever deserved one, it's him.
Well, it's too bad that this didn't work out the way that Sidney Powell had planned. She's certainly a very capable lawyer. I think that probably Flynn's fate was sealed at that December hearing where, he was still represented by Covington and Burling at the time, and Judge Sullivan asked him all those questions. Do you know what you signed? Are you aware that you're waiving this right and that right? That would have been the time for him to say, no, I signed it under duress and there's other evidence, etc. I mean, it's a complicated thing, but...
there's no doubt, you're right. I mean, that was, in a way, you've got to say you did it, General. You did it. That was his time. But due to bad legal counsel,
right,
due to pressures on his son, and things that we probably know nothing of in detail. You know, he felt he had no choice. But
Right.
that did seal his fate.
Yeah.
And to be honest, in a way, I hate to say it, in a way, Sullivan's kind of right.
Well, I agree with you, unfortunately, because what we're going to be speaking with Larry Klayman at 5 p.m., just about an hour from now. But what some people have been saying is that Sullivan was painted into a corner, and that if he had overturned this, he would have basically been setting a precedent that would nullify all plea bargaining deals in the future.
I would have to agree with that. Like you say, grudgingly, I'd have to agree with it, but
the law is a complicated thing, isn't it, Larry? You can get jammed up even if you're in the right.
Yes, it is. And that's why there are so many laws, folks. I know it's troublesome. It seems like the law oftentimes, too many times, protects the criminal versus us. But let this be an example. There are situations where the law has to be final. And in some ways, when it's being handled by corrupt people, you know, yes, it's not right. But just as you're saying, you don't want to pass a precedent-setting judgment that anybody that makes a plea deal from now on can change it. What's the point of a plea deal if it can be changed?
Right.
Especially when he went through the trouble he did explaining to Flynn what he did that day, you know, making sure he understood the ramifications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate, but we're almost out of time here, Larry, so I want to remind people to visit nicholslive.com, click on the donate tab, and send Larry $5 or $10, $20 for Christmas, something like that. You can use his PayPal address, nicholslive@aol.com, or maybe get him a nice Christmas card, put it in an envelope with $20, $100, whatever you want to do, $5. It's even $5. It's a nice gesture. And you know, Larry, I almost enjoy the $5 financial contributions, the sponsorship at that level. I almost like that more because I don't want to ever have anybody feel like they're under some financial obligation. And really the power of what we're doing is having hundreds or hopefully thousands of micro sponsors so that there is no one big money sponsor, because invariably, whether we're, you know, whatever kind of company you might be running, whoever is controlling the money is controlling what happens. We see it in the mainstream news. We see it with people that you've spoken to us about. Even today, Kenneth Starr seems like he's doing all right. And how do we know that he wasn't influenced by money? So if a lot of people watching us right now. Yep.
Jason, let me say, several people have sent, and I thank you all that have sent, and I agree with Jason. The amount helps, but it's not the main thing. And some of the letters and notes that I have received, y'all have no idea how that helps me to get through a day. Just to know that some of you out there do care.
Yeah.
And that you do listen.
Yep.
It means a lot.
One kind message smashes 1,000 trolls, Larry.
Yeah, and I get the 1,000 trolls. Trust me,
Exactly.
I get them.
Exactly. Oh, and you know what? I also wanted to remind people, Larry, we've recently taken to simulcasting our videos on the Larry Nichols official YouTube channel. So let me make sure we've got that working properly, because it's a good option for people. Yeah, there we go. We're live right now. Oh, Larry, we've got over 100 people watching on the Larry Nichols official YouTube channel. So that's a good way for us to...
I want to say to those people, normally I come on after this program. I may come on for a little bit, so y'all, thank you for tuning in to Jason as well. That helps, because Jason, it helps to get a lot of the material you bring out from me out that I wouldn't think about on my little program.
Kind of inspiring talking points and ideas. Well, it's good. I'm glad we're able to grow your social media footprint there, Larry, and this simulcast feature is a nice one to use, particularly this week The Crowdsource the Truth main YouTube channel has been attacked by social engineers, so we don't have the normal reach that we have with the live stream. And you know what? This is something that I haven't even touched on, Larry. These malicious social engineers, they think they're shutting me down, but they have an impact on you. They have an impact on the Moriartys. They have an impact on everybody who comes on this show and is, trying to do the right thing and make a living at doing that. So it's really important for people to financially support my guests. It's a great time to go to Nichols Live if you haven't been there before. It's also a great time to become a sponsor of Crowdsource the Truth. We're going to have another sponsor exclusive episode tonight of More Pain at 8 p.m. So once you get done sending Larry a holiday sponsorship, make sure you get onto patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and don't miss tonight's episode of More Pain. Larry, we'll be back next week. We're getting real close to Christmas, so hope you're having a nice time decorating the tree, gonna see family and all that stuff, but we'll see you next week. Will be Christmas Eve, so that'll be a nice show for us.
We'll be back then unless something breaks in between and we have to do a special program, and do not be surprised if that does happen.
Absolutely.
There are some things in the work that might cause us to come back early.
Absolutely. All right, Larry. Well, thanks very much for another great show, and thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you later.